Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this video lesson. Let's go ahead and get started creating a Unity game, very simple game. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Unity, and so for me on the Macintosh I go to the launch pad and I can just type in Unity over here. Since I've already installed it, I'm going to go ahead and click Unity. The thing that's going to come up is for me to sign in. You don't have to sign in. You could skip this step if you'd like, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip this step. And then I'm ready to create a new project. So the project that I'm going to create, I'll just go ahead and click New. And then let's go ahead and give this project a name. So we're going to say roll a ball game. And we want this to be 3D. It's going to save it in this particular directory. That's fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Create Project. Give it a couple of seconds, and then we're going to see the environment display for us to create this particular game. And so this is the Unity program. As you can see over here, if I say About Unity, you'll notice that this is the version 2017.1, and that's the version that we're going to be using throughout the duration of the course to create our games. At this point, we want to make sure that we have saved our scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on File, Save Scenes, and then you'll notice that it's going to by default save it inside of the Assets folder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside of the Assets folder. So I'll say New Folder, and we're just simply going to type in Scenes. And then I'll click Create. And then what is the name of this scene for this game? We're just simply going to call it Mini Game. And then I'll click Save. You'll notice that when you've done that, over here in the Project folder, you'll see in the Scenes folder, you have Mini Game. Next, let's go ahead and create a plane that we can use as our game board. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to click on Game Object, hover on top of 3D Object, and then you're going to select Plane. So here's the plane that we're working with. And you'll notice that it's called plane over here, but what I want to do is to change that to the word ground. So I'm simply going to tap once, tap again. Now you see that I'm able to change the name. So we're going to type in the word ground. Then I press enter. Another thing that I could do is I want to make sure that this plane is centered in the origin. So what we could do is we could take a look at this inspector area. And one thing that you could do is you could click on this guy over here and then click Reset. Let me show you again. So with the inspector menu open, and by the way, if you don't see the inspector menu open, you can just simply go to Window, click on Inspector. This will display. And then you'll see over here where it says Transform. You're going to see that little tiny gear. And if I click on that, I have some various options. Watch what Reset does. In essence, it's basically going to move it to the 0, 0, 0 location. So over here where it says Position, if I type in the number 10, say for example, and then I'm going to press enter. See how the ground moved or that plane moved? Now let me go back over here, click on the gear, click reset, and you see what happens. So in essence, it's just placing everything at 0, 0, 0. It's changing the rotation to 0, 0, 0. It's making it so that now this plane exists at the origin. If you wanted to change the position, so let me type in 2, 3, and 4. So you see that the X, Y, and Z axis have been changed. If I wanted to, I could change the rotation. So how about like 12, 13, and 14, say for example. So you can perform any of these kind of changes numerically if you wanted to. Know that you could just simply click on this gear, click on Reset, and this is how you can get it back to the origin. Now, in terms of the rotation, or in terms of the X-axis, let me go ahead and just show you another way that you can move these items back and forth. You'll see this little tiny picture over here that shows you the definition of X-axis, Y-axis, and Z-axis. So you see over here when it comes to X-axis, if I take that little tiny arrow and drag that back and forth right here. So I'm holding, I have a trackpad right now, but if you have a mouse, you could just simply hold down the mouse button, drag this back and forth, or I have my left hand on the trackpad and my right hand is moving back and forth like this. So this is moving in the X-axis direction. So you'll notice over here that you can obtain negative values because you are either on the positive side of the X-axis or you are on the negative side of the X-axis. So that's what this button is all about, or what this arrow represents. For the y-axis, notice that that's the definition of up and down. So as I'm dragging this thing up and down, you'll see over here these values are changing for the position for the y-axis. And then over here for the z-axis, again, we're moving that, I guess, slanted to the left and to the bottom right, however this thing happens to be arranged, right? So that's what the definition of x, y, and z-axis. I guess really the most important thing to understand is that y-axis is moving up and down, whereas the x-axis and the z-axis is either moving left and right or forward and backward. You can think of it that way. Let me go ahead and make sure that everything is back to the origin. So I'm going to click reset after I click this gear. I click reset, and so now all the values have been reset to 0. Okay, the next thing to consider is to be able to see all that you've created, in this case just the plane, in the entire scene view. One way that you can do that is to click the Edit button or the Edit menu option and then Frame Selected. Also notice that the keyboard shortcut is just simply to press the letter F. By the way, what I forgot to mention is you want to make sure that the ground is selected because that's the item that we want to see in our entire scene view. So first I should have selected this. Then I'll go to Edit and then I'll select Frame Selected, or I could have pressed the letter F and then you'll see what happens. There's a readjustment so that you can see this in the entire scene. Now, I've tried to increase the quality of this video so that you can see these very faint grid lines. Let's say that you don't want the grid lines. The way to change that would be to go over here to this Gizmos drop-down. When you click the Gizmos drop-down, you'll see that it says Show Grid. Let me go ahead and remove the check mark, and then notice that the guidelines or the grid lines are removed. Again, if I wanted to place those back, I can just simply click Gizmos, Show Grid, and in this case, they're back. I want to go ahead and remove them, so let me go ahead and remove Show Grid, and so now you don't see any grid lines on this project. Okay, at this point, we want to change the scale of the ground plane. So what I'm going to do is select Ground, and you'll notice these buttons over here. This one allows you to change the scale. So if I select it, notice how the buttons change over here so that they are resizable. And then if I select this one over here, this is for moving the object around. So let me go ahead and click on this guy over here to change the scale. And you'll notice that I can click this red button and drag it. And I can also take this blue button and drag it as well to change the scale. Now, if I take this green button, this is a plane, so you're going to change numeric values as you see over here. You're going to change numeric values, but a plane doesn't have any volume, so you don't see any immediate change over here. By the way, I pointed out over here on the inspector where it says scale. Notice that if I change the X value, you see values that are changing over here. Another way that we can change the X values to hover on top of the X. Let me hold the mouse pointer down, and then I can just simply drag over here. I can drag over here where it says Z-axis scale. And then, of course, for the Y-axis, we don't see any change because there's no volume. But I do want to show you something that you may get into trouble with. What if I take this Y-axis scale button and I go down like this? Okay, so now we don't see anything. Well, what has happened is you've basically flipped the plane. So I'm on a Macintosh. If I hold down the Alt button and then I'm going to click and hold down on my trackpad and look under here. So this is where I can see the plane. So it's upside down. You see over here that negative Y value does that. So let me just go ahead and double click over here, type in a 1. Well, actually, let me just delete, type in a 1 and press enter. Now it looks like it's transparent over here. I'm going to hold down the Alt button over here, and then let me just go ahead and drag over here. And now finally I can see that surface. So if you happen to make a mistake and drag that Y-axis so that it's a negative value, then now you know how to get out of it. You're basically going to turn that into a positive value, and then you can see the top part of the plane. So in order to establish our scale, what we're going to do is we're going to have the ground plane selected. We're going to type in 2 over here for the X-axis, 1 for the Y-axis, and then we'll type in 2 for the Z-axis. At this point, we are ready to create our player object. So locate the Hierarchy tab, and then you'll see a Create drop-down right below it. If you click that, here are some of the different, what are referred to as primitives that you can enter onto your scene. In this case, I'm going to select 3D object, and then I'll go to sphere. So when I click on sphere, here it is. Now, if I wanted to focus on this particular sphere, I could click Edit and then Frame Selected, or I could just simply press F on the keyboard. So let me go ahead and do that, and notice that we zoom in. Now you'll notice that the sphere looks like it's kind of embedded or inside of the ground plane. So if I were to click this button over here where I can move this object, I can click over here and move this sphere up, down, left, right, so forth and so on. Well, I want this to be right on the surface. Well, the problem is that's a little bit too high, and I'm not able to exactly get it just right. So is there something else that I can do? Absolutely. So over here, you'll notice that I have X, Y, and Z axis. What if I want to move this to the origin? Well, if I wanted to move this to the origin, first of all, the sphere is selected. Oh, by the way, let me change that name. So let me select this, select it again. Now I could change the name. We're going to change that to player. Press enter. Okay, so the name of this sphere is now player. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this gear and click reset. So what happens now is it moves this sphere to the origin. It's, by the way, the same origin that the plane is set to. The problem is that the sphere is now inside. Half is on top, half is on the bottom. I shouldn't say inside. Half is on top of the ground plane, half is on the bottom of the ground plane. Well, when it comes to these primitives, right, so if I click Create, Object, when it comes to these guys, cubes, spheres, so forth and so on, when it comes to these primitives, they typically are 1 by 1 by 1, or sometimes 1 by 2 by 1. So what we can do is I can take this guy, change the position. So let's see what happens if I change this to 0.5. So 0.5, press enter. And I did this on the y-axis because remember the y-axis is referring to up and down. And the x-axis and the z-axis, I can leave that alone. So now, as you can see, the sphere is perfectly on top of the plane. Okay, at this point, you see the background and the player have the same color, white, and that doesn't look really good in terms of offering contrast. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a material. And let's say that we're going to create the blue material, which will be the material for the background. And we're going to apply it to that background so that we have some sort of contrast. So here's what we'll do. Over here in the Project tab area, you'll notice over here that I see a Create drop down. So if I click Create, then I see all these different options, and the top option says Folder. So let's go ahead and tap on that folder, and as you can see here, we're going to create a new folder, and what we're going to type is the word Materials. Press enter. Now the Materials folder is already selected, and that's what you want. You don't want to have the minigame selected. Make sure that the Materials tab or the Materials folder is still selected. Now what you can do is you can click on Create, and what we're going to create is a specific material. So I'm going to select Material, and there it is. Now the specific material that I want to create, we're going to call that Background. Press enter, and there we go. All right, so this is the default color for our materials, for our background material, and obviously I don't like that. So you'll notice over here, I have this one checkbox over here. It's called Albedo. All right, so with Albedo, you'll see over here a color picker. So if I click on that, this color picker allows me to select any color. So one of the things I can do is just simply tab around here. So let me tap over here, and you can see what the preview color looks like. If I wanted to pick a particular color, like for example, let me click this guy. I really like the picture of this sky, or of this camera, or of this area over here, or of this purple over here. What that color picker allows me to do is to pick an individual color, like let me pick that sky, say for example, and you can see what happens. Alright, so let me click that color picker again because I didn't mean to select that. Maybe I want a darker blue color, so I'm going to move this thing up and down, and maybe right here, and say that I want this particular color. Again, notice the change over here on the preview, what that looks like. Another thing you can do is you have these sliders over here for these RGB values. So R stands for red, G stands for green, B stands for blue, and then you have A for alpha. And so RGB, those are the three primary colors that you can make any color. And as you'll notice over here, you can go all the way from 0 all the way up to 255. And that's the same case for green and blue, Well, 256 times 256 times 256, that means you can generate 16.7 million different colors. So if you wanted to, you could change these sliders over here to change what the color is supposed to look like. You'll notice over here that it's changing this decimal value. We already saw that this goes from 0 to 255. Well, one of the things I could do is just to type in a particular color. For example, if I double tap over here and type in 0, tab button on my keyboard, type in 32, tab button on my keyboard, type in 64, tab button on my keyboard, and you can see here that this is a certain version of blue. So let's say that I want that where it's 0, 32, 64. I'm happy with that. I'm going to close this color picker. All right, so if I want to apply this background color to this particular plane, all I have to do is hover on top over here where it says scenes, here's materials, here's my background material. I'm going to hold down my mouse pointer, click, hold it down, drag right on top of the background or right on top of our ground plane, let go, and you'll see now that the background of the plane is that blue color that you just selected. So obviously you can create as many materials as you want over here and then just simply drag and drop them to whatever object that you are working on your scene. Okay, one last change that I would like to make is the shadow for this particular object, this primitive, the sphere. You'll notice that by default, whenever you create a scene, you're going to get a skybox, you're going to get a default shadow, you're also going to get a directional light. And I don't like how the direction of this shadow is being cast. I want to make a change to it. So the first thing that I'm going to do over here in this section, I'm going to select the directional light, and you'll notice that I have several values over here. Well, one of the things that I can do is to change that. So if I just hover on top of Y, and you'll notice that as I'm changing the value, you see the live effect that it has over here. In fact, let me go ahead and just simply drag that, and you see the effect that it has. You're moving the directional light. In this particular case, what I want to do is I want to change that to the number 60, and then I'll press enter. Now, in this case, you may think, well, what makes 60 so good? It doesn't matter. It's just random in this particular case. I just want to show you that one of the things you can do is to change the directional light. You're just simply going to change the rotation, and in this case, we're changing the y-axis.